morning, good afternoon, good evening. Some people have been asking me the 31st of July protests against the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 was yesterday. Was it a success or a failure? I think it is a simple question. And I think sometimes people have got to understand that there are no simple answers. That is a reality. I'm not trying to avoid to answer the question. I'm telling you the truth. This can be compared to asking, did the American and the Israelis win the Operation Fury war against Iran? Well, there's no simple answer to that one. If one was asked that after the 40-day Operation Fury and listened to what the Americans were saying, one would have been forgiven to believe that the Americans achieved their objectives and therefore then they've won the war and Iraq lost. But the reality is, as far as Iran's objective was concerned, it was to survive Operation Fury, the killing of many of their leaders and the destruction of many of their infrastructure during that 40-day war. And at the end of it, they did survive. The Iran government did not collapse. And when the bombing eased, the Iran went for the jugular vein, closed the Strait of Hormuz. And America and the Israelis began to realize, just as the world also started to realize what was really going on. And Iran has maintained its stranglehold on the jugular vein. And the Americans are feeling it, as well as their allies in that region and the world at large. And so the real outcome of this war looks like Iran will have the final say. And so Iran can be considered as the winner here, although that wasn't obvious when the Operation Fury started, or 40 days when soon after it stopped. So my answer to the people who asked me was the 31st July protest a success or failure? My answer to that is it will be judged a resounding success if those protests are going to be the first skirmishes in the fight to scrap the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 and to finally end this anarchy of dictatorship. Time will tell. Time will tell whether this was just noise or this was something significant. There was substance in it. And if there was substance in this protest, I would expect that the people will be going up the skirmish ladder. And the escalation ladder, and keep on applying the pressure on the regime. This constitutional amendment bill is an obnoxious piece of legislation that should have never been allowed. But anyone who thinks the protests were going to end with the amendment bill removed or ZANU-PF removed from office, I think that is part of the noise that I'm talking about. People who are making just a lot of noise and they don't know what they're talking about. We should focus on substance, what can and cannot be achieved, and focus on what can be achieved and realize that that cannot be achieved overnight, given where we are. It is a long answer, but it is the honest answer. Think about it. Thank you very much, Benjamin. Welcome to the program.
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. You know, I have to agree with you there to say it's not written in stone whether it's a success or not. It's not black and white. But what we can do is we can look at, for example, you know, what ZANU-PF would think. And, you know, look, people had said that they were going to demonstrate. People were saying they were protesting, picketing, and so forth. We know that actually in Zimbabwe, maybe some parts of, you know, Bulawayo, they actually did the protest. They came in and they did what they needed to do. And they left. And rightfully, they said it was going to be peaceful, and they did it peacefully. But in other parts of the country, we find out that people chose to stay at home. Why? There are many reasons. Some are saying it is just plain cowardice from the other, you know, provinces within the country. But when you look at it in terms of ZANU-PF were, I would say, you know, on one hand, they were itching for a fight. I mean, we saw state ministers, provincial ministers, you know, giving their speeches. On the left or on the right, there was an army commander, and on the other side, there was, you know, a police, you know, chief or something like that. This was clear intimidation to say, if you're going to do this, these state security forces will be there to deal with you. And they were showing that they were on their side. They belonged to ZANU-PF. So on that end, ZANU-PF exposed themselves at the same time, but also gained by stopping, you know, the protest. So they can claim to say, well, there was no protest. It was business as usual. Though it wasn't business as usual, as most people stayed at home. But the fact is, it's not clear cut to say, but that is what ZANU-PF did. They intimidated the people on social media, on news outlets, rallies and so forth.
Well, here is a video clip we used a few days ago of real people who were intimidated by the regime.
I'd like to formally apologize for being involved in the march on the 31st of July and actually announce that I'm no longer involved in the march because I've been getting insight on the consequences of the Zimbabwean people peacefully demonstrating to the government about any development ideas. That is wrong. People should not ask for development. People, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm out of the march. I would like to plead on behalf of myself and my family and ask for forgiveness and say, please, I am sorry. Please just don't harm any of my family. Don't harm the children. Don't just keep my family out of it. If your grudge is with me, you are welcome. You can come and kill me, but please leave my family out of it. And I am also out of the march. So let's not harm children, and let's not harm people who were not even involved in the march in the first place. It's me who was involved in the march, and if you want to kill and murder anyone, come and murder me so that it can be over. And after that, I am sorry. The economy of Zimbabwe is prospering. There is nothing that we should try to communicate about development. There is nothing that we should try to communicate about anything because Zimbabwe is doing well. And I was out of line. I should not have tried to bring up ideas on how the economy can grow. I should have not have tried to communicate with the government about anything. I was wrong. I am out of the march.
I probably shouldn't say this, but AutoZone hates when you do this before.
Sorry about that. The point that is being made here, and it should be emphasized here, is that the right to hold peaceful protests is not dependent on whether one is right to hold the various views. In this case here, whether or not she was right that the economy is not doing well is irrelevant. The right to hold peaceful demonstration is fundamental in the sense that it is part and parcel, an integral part of saying you've got a meaningful say in the governance of the country. ZANU-PF does not have the monopoly of knowledge. ZANU-PF should not be the one that says the economy is doing well and therefore then there will be no other views on the matter. No. Even if the economy is doing well, as ZANU-PF is claiming, surely other people may think it could do even better. So why shouldn't they be heard? This is the part and parcel of the nonsense of this regime. The right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country is not negotiable. It should not be given to some as a privilege and denied to others. It is a fundamental right. So the emphasis here is that this intimidation should not be happening. should be rejected. Because one of the pitfalls in that is, what about if it is not doing well and the regime says it's doing well? What then? We are stuck. And that is exactly where we are. Zimbabwe is a failed state. In 1980, the country had a GDP per capita of $6,000. And we had all the prospects of becoming the South Korea of Africa. But soon after independence, the decline started. And Zimbabwe has been in decline ever since. The economy, the GDP per capita in Zimbabwe today is a third of what it was in 1980. $2,000 per person. Mnangagwa has been in power for now getting on to 8 years. That GDP per capita has not improved. He was very clever soon after he got into power in 2017 to try to put as much distance between himself and the Mugabe regime. He called himself the Second Republic, as if to say he had nothing to do with the First Republic, which is nonsense. It was none other than Mnangagwa himself who played a pivotal role in ZANU-PF rigging elections since 1980. In 2008, when the country held the nearest ever got to holding free, fair, and credible elections, ZANU-PF lost. Mutasa, Mugabe himself, and many other ZANU-PF leaders had accepted the result. But guess who? Mnangagwa and Chiwenga stepped in. And they went on to launch Operation Mavotera Papi, whose objectives were two. The first one is to wrestle power from the opposition, Morgan Tsvangirai and his fellow MDC friends. And the second objective was to punish the people of Zimbabwe for having rejected ZANU-PF in the first place. So he was the one who kept this Mugabe administration in power all these 37 years. And yet after the coup, he wanted to put as much distance as possible, as if to say he had nothing to do with it. We are just repeating the same mistake here, where those in power believe they have the solution, they know best, and everybody else should shut up. He got into power with his Second Republic and is following the same ideas. No one else should have a meaningful say in the governance of the country. That is at the heart of this fight. Wrong or not, or whether the vision 2030 is going to be real or not, is irrelevant. Still, the people have the right to hold peaceful demonstrations. That should be the bottom line.
You know, when you look at this video of this young lady, you know, you can, you know, she left clues as to why she had a change of heart. I mean, clearly she says that, we shouldn't be asking for development. If please leave my family. If you want to kill me, you know, do it to me and leave the rest. That is very powerful enough to expose the intentions of why ZANU PF got to her. Stop it, or else you will be in trouble. So, this is the ruthless regime that we are dealing with. We shouldn't think otherwise, that you could just simply just find it easy to just approach them, and all of a sudden everything will be okay. ZANU PF will stop to nothing. Just now you were talking about how, when they lost the 2028 election, how they went on a rampage where, a lot of more than 300 people were killed just in 2008 alone, because they had lost an election. So, this is what is to be expected when you go up against a regime like ZANU PF, a dictatorship like ZANU PF, who think that it is their right to, to do as they please. You cannot correct. You cannot ask, for development. You cannot ask any questions. Yet democracy demands that you hold leaders accountable, but not ZANU PF. So even though she left the, the physical protest and picket itself, I think she left a very, very important message to say, these guys will kill you. These guys will find ways to intimidate you. They will even threaten your family. And I think they have exposed ZANU PF, to those that didn't know. And one other thing that, our viewers need to know, ZANU PF even went, an extra step by editing that video. The one that you played, Wilbert, is the original video. They have one where they have removed, don't kill me, please. Zimbabwe's economy is beautiful. That is the picture that they want to send. But I mean, people are not stupid. The same way it has been circulating and people have come to the realization that this is an edited video, they will simply put the two together and say, hey, this is what was spoken. This is now what ZANU PF is speaking. So I think, like we started the program, we said, it isn't black and white to say who won, this battle. But it depends how you look at it. As ZANU PF have been exposed, yes, I think ZANU PF has been exposed extremely. And they actually did the other part themselves. I mean, look, when people talk about we are going to picket, and people are talking themselves and saying, we're going to do this peacefully. And this first thing, or the first order of business, is to push army tanks around the cities, is to get, provincial ministers to speak with army commanders and chief of police, riot police all over, cities, with truck, those trucks that spray people, water, guns, dogs, etc. You can see that this now is is to intimidate the people. So it kind of exposed who ZANU PF are and what they are doing and what they term democracy. I think we've always spoken about how ZANU-PF's definition of democracy is far, far different from what other people, term it. So they did most of the exposing. And I'm actually happy and I'm proud of this young lady, who stood up. Yes, she couldn't go the extra mile or the whole way, but I would say, it could be a relay race. She just started the, part of it, or was involved in part of the relay. You would know who actually started it. Somebody else could have started. ZANU-PF is still trying to figure that out. So this is what is to be expected when you have a brutal, violent regime in place that will stop at nothing to keep their stranglehold on power, to keep us intimidated and subservient to them. They will go and do absolutely anything, including killing.
Well, the intimidation was real. And here is a video clip of Al Jazeera reporting on what happened in Zimbabwe yesterday.
To hold a public gathering in Zimbabwe, you need police permission, and those are hardly ever granted, especially when it's for an anti-government protest. So this is what happens usually the morning of a planned protest. People wake up and they assess the mood in the city center, see how things are feeling on the ground. Some people have opened their shops, but others are still approaching a wait-and-see attitude. You see those shops there, those are closed. Chances are because this protest has been banned by the police. Police have been deployed to certain areas in the capital, places where people normally gather to protest. Now, those areas have been sealed off. People can't access those particular areas. Now, some Zimbabweans are angry about the recent changes to the constitution, and these changes include extending the electoral cycles of the presidential, local government, and parliamentary elections from 5 to 7 years, and that only MPs going forward can vote for the president and not people themselves. That's why some people are angry. Several cases have been filed at the Constitutional Court. Zimbabweans saying that a national referendum should have been held before changes to the constitution were done. The governing ZANU-PF party says a referendum is not necessary.
Thank you very much to that report from Al Jazeera. But that says it all. The intimidation was there. The police were deployed days before the protests were meant to be staged. And in some of these cases, the CIO and the secret police, ununiformed police officers would have been deployed probably weeks before that. So the level of intimidation cannot be denied. It was there. And the regime has been known to not just threaten, but to use brute force. And what should be remembered here is that the regime is not even ashamed of its brutality. Here is Mnangagwa himself boasting about what he can do, or what the regime can do.
We will not stop our development plans and programs because of the noise from some little boys. They will continue making that noise, but we shall continue to move on. But I want anybody who may want to be nonsensical and bring chaos in this country, we are ready for any chaos, to deal with any chaos. Whoever who preach hate speech shall be responsible for their hate speech. Our prisons are not full. We want peace. We want unity. Those who do not disagree with that, do so quietly and peacefully. Then, tichafamba tose murugare nokuirana. Asukata mhesha mkono tinokuveza.
That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. Anyone who dares to hold a different opinion to the regime is considered neshamkono, troublemaker, rabble rouser. And when he says Nokweza, he means it. We will beat you up. Our jails are not full. Mnangagwa has been in ZANU-PF since the country's independence. And if the truth be told, he has been at the heart of some of the most violent events in Zimbabwe's history in the last 46 years. He was the minister of Secret Service during the Kokura Wundi years of 1983 to 1987. He was at the heart, in fact, he was the one who organized the 2008 Operation Mavotera Papi. And I've mentioned it. His principal objective was to wrestle power from the opposition and to punish people for having rejected ZANU-PF. He was involved in the military coup of 2017. And he has been at the heart of all the blatant vote rigging that has taken place in Zimbabwe these last 46 years. After the coup in 2017, he promised to hold free, fair, and credible elections. But when he failed to deliver on that promise, and people went on the street to protest, he went after them. Shoot to kill. This is the man we are dealing with here. There can be no denying that the people's fear that the regime will use violence against them if they stage the street protest was real cannot be denied. That is a fundamental reality, a political reality in Zimbabwe. We have, whether we care to admit it or not, an individual who is the state president who does not hesitate to shoot to kill, to retain his iron grip on power. This constitutional amendment bill number 3 has been shoved down the nation's throat because he wants to stay in power at all costs. And if using brute force to stay in power, so be it. There can be no doubt about that. But like I said before, this protest should not be seen as the beginning and you should have delivered the results. It should be seen as a long-term objective. The first skirmish in a fight to have the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 scrapped and the ZANU-PF dictatorship dismantled. If you look at it in those terms, then you will see that this is a fight that cannot be defined as a one-day thing. Some of us on this platform, we said at the beginning that the street protests should not have as its objective to have the ZANU-PF regime removed from office, because that cannot be done. That's not what street protests are about. And in this case here, it will never happen that way. But that should not stop us realizing that we have got a very obnoxious piece of legislation and we need to do everything in our power to have it scrapped. That was the argument we used here.
Now, we know that these protests and demonstrations were not only confined to Zimbabwe only. Zimbabweans are all over the globe in their millions, mostly as political or economic refugees. So across the border in South Africa, they decided to go and picket outside the Zimbabwean embassy. And they had also their message that they wanted delivered to the ZANU-PF government. What major difference that I noticed there was that when the Zimbabweans and other nationalities came in to show their solidarity and their support for other fellows, Africans, the police, the South African police, was actually there, free, and everybody was just doing what they needed to do, and everything happened peacefully, basically. This is in contrast to Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, even if you go and you ask for permission, one guy went into the police station asking for permission to go and picket. He never came out. They arrested him. Most of the opposition leaders that wanted to be part of this demonstration were either abducted, they were falsely imprisoned. We know of a guy that, I forget his name. I think he's from, the Beitbridge area, that has been locked up and people really don't know his whereabouts because he is anti, ZANU-PF. And he was abducted, taken away by CIO agents, towards the date of the so-called protest. So on the other hand, you have South Africa that allows its people to demonstrate as long as you do not go on looting and so forth. Whereas in Zimbabwe, the constitution will give you to say people are allowed to demonstrate, to protest, But then on the physical ground, ZANU-PF will tell you, I mean, you just played a video where Emerson Mnangagwa comes out straight and says, we will arrest you. You know, we will not even tolerate you. I was talking to one, ZANU-PF character on social media, and I asked him and I said, you are saying that there are laws that needs to be followed and procedures. Explain your procedures. And then we can look at, does it actually say that in the Constitution? You will find that, and I've said this, ZANU-PF has its own interpretation of that document. That is completely wild to what it actually says. Because they believe it. Because that is part and parcel of who they are and their DNA. And you cannot then correct it to say, no, it meant to say this. This is what it says. Because you are dealing with somebody that says, it is my way or the highway. If you do not believe what I'm telling you, I could just kill you. That is how ZANU-PF works. So, again, it exposed ZANU-PF to say you cannot even allow your own people to do any protest or to even demand accountability or to speak out about a very important legislator in your country. But in other countries, we are actually protecting your citizens and giving them the same, treatment that our constitution or that we give our own, people the right to be heard. So if Zimbabweans want to be heard, they might as well travel to Zambia, to South Africa. That is what it's saying. In Zimbabwe, you will not be heard. And this exposes ZANU-PF for who they are. I also had a couple of friends that attended the march, the picket at the embassy in South Africa. Well, we saw the numbers. The numbers weren't quite pleasing because of different reasons behind it. But what the positive they said is, if and you were speaking about that a little bit to say, if people can use this as momentum or a slingshot to keep moving and propelling forward and doing now things that can actually stop this whole amendment, stop the ZANU-PF regime, I think this would have been a very, very, great success. But if it was just a one-day thing where, we just went there, spent a few hours, came back, and now we've got no plan, then definitely, we were just kidding ourselves to think that, you could stop CUB 3 by just simply, picketing outside an embassy or demonstrating within Zimbabwe itself. That would have been very, incredibly naive.
Well, I'll just play a section of this interview, of this video showing the demonstrations in South Africa.
The last time I interacted with him, we could not even get what he wanted to say because he was very agitated. And I'm glad today we found him. My brother, how are you? Please just tell us who are you, where you from, and what should happen today. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. My name is William. Sikini is my surname. I'm a Zimbabwean. I am here because I want to frustrate the system of CAP 3. As Zimbabweans, we feel that the country has been hijacked by a group of a cartel, and we are not going to tolerate that to happen in Zimbabwe. We have a lot of talented young people that can actually rule Zimbabwe, but Mnangagwa is trying to monopolize the country, and this we are going to say no to it. His term is finished, and this is why we're trying to protest against him.
This is something that surprised me when I followed up the news. There are young parliamentarians, the youth in the Zimbabwean parliament. And of course, it's majority of people sitting in the parliament of Zimbabwe who make sure that CAP 3 actually works. Boys za Mdala. They even have a spokesperson. It's proof that Mnangagwa is supported by the youth. Is that a fair assessment of what is happening, or these are just cover-ups? People are suffering.
The reality on the ground is that Mnangagwa is not supported by the youth. Mnangagwa is actually buying the youth through incentives. He's incentivizing them by giving them cars, giving them cash, giving them gold chains, and supporting them. Now, these guys are actually not looking at the situation on the ground. They're just being bought, and it could happen to anybody else. If I give you cash, you could do the same thing. These guys are actually frustrated by his administration, but because there's cash circulating, this is why they're getting to Mnangagwa.
The lady who started this, her name is Melody. She has since withdrawn her participation, and she's even asked those who want to take her out, they must rather leave her family and only direct their anger towards her so they can take her out so she shields her family. Do you feel your participation in this protest make you safer?
I think our participation makes us safer, but I would like to make this point very clear to both the people, local people, and those that are in Zimbabwe at the moment. Zimbabwe is a military state, and the powers are all within the military and the police. So I think that she might not be safe as long as she remains in Zimbabwe. But at the same time, our participation in South Africa, alongside the Dudula movement, I think it will send a signal to the Zimbabwean government to say we are behind her efforts. This, we stand by her in all what she's trying to do, and we're very happy that she has initiated this process.
I'm seeing more security personnel. I'm seeing more South Africans. I'm seeing March and Munch. I'm seeing Operation Dudula. Chimorenga, man.
Zimbabweans are cowards generally. I would have anticipated the whole street to be full of Zimbabweans, and I'm very embarrassed that Zimbabweans are not here. It is very, very embarrassing because I see Dudula, I see Operation Dudula, I see MK and so forth, March and March, but Zimbabweans are not here, and this is an embarrassment.
I think this is one of the tragedies of our time. As much as one would acknowledge that in Zimbabwe you are subjected to all manner of abuse and violence by the regime, you cannot also deny that if you're in a country like South Africa, as the gentleman is correctly pointing out here, what is the reason, what is the excuse for you not coming out and expressing your disappointment? This is a peaceful demonstration. You are not going to engage in any violence. What is stopping you coming out and saying, we are not happy with what is happening? That point cannot be, we cannot run away from it. And as the people of Zimbabwe, ultimately, we also have to take responsibility for the tragic realities in our country. Yes, somebody could argue that, no, the regime will have its operatives even at those demonstrations, and they'll be taking down your name and they'll pass it on so that next time you're in Zimbabwe, you're in trouble. That is true. But we've also got to realize that doing nothing or cowering to the regime's dictate is not solving the problem. Zimbabwe is a failed state. Millions are in South Africa because they are running away from Zimbabwe. They are either economic refugees and or political refugees. And thousands of them were forced to return back to Zimbabwe from South Africa last month when there was threats of violence against foreigners. They were going back to the same failed state, which we have got to acknowledge. Some of us have been outside the country for the last 20 years, and in that period, we have never lifted a finger to try to fight to get it right. Those within the country and outside. The situation has not improved. The situation has only got worse. And as long as somebody is within the law, holding peaceful demonstrations, we should not allow ourselves to be cowed by the regime. Some people have sounded their objections to Zimbabweans who are fierce dogs on the social media. But in practice, they become as tame and harmless as a puppy. Even on social media, when it comes to criticizing the regime, I believe people could do a lot more. Here in the social media, you can use a false name. And yet some people are still not doing it. The fight to end this ZANU-PF dictatorship is not going to happen on its own. That is a fundamental truth that many Zimbabweans out there have to accept and to realize. The longer we have allowed this madness to continue, the worse it has become. We have said on this platform, this Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 is seeking to give Mnangagwa 2 more years. The guy is illegitimate already. He went into State House on the cocktail of the military coup in 2017. He went on to rig the 2018 elections and then rig the 2023 elections. And we have let it all happen. And now he has passed this Constitutional Amendment Bill to extend his illegitimate stay in office by a further 2 more years. And many Zimbabweans out there, if the truth be told, have said nothing. That surely cannot be right. I totally agree that when you've got a country like Zimbabwe that is in a serious mess and people are doing nothing about it, or most people are doing very little about it, it is hard to see how the international community can step in and help. Because how can they help you if you're not helping yourself? We need to face ourselves in the mirror and be honest with ourselves and admit that we have let ourselves down. Ben, do you want to say your closing remarks?
Thank you. I wanted to create a bit of insight of what is happening in a country which is in Africa, Ghana. Ghana is extending their, they are amending their constitution for the same term limits, president, all public officers, from 4 years to 5 years. But in there, Ghana is saying that for the process to actually work, and this is the president, the current president, that is saying that they need at least, they're going to hold a referendum. And that referendum has to win by, I'm not sure what percentage, but what I'm sure is there should be at least 40% voter turnout of all, registered voters. And that this extension will actually kick in 2027. That is when they're going to have their referendum. But he will be done by then. So he says he's not part and parcel of it. It will not benefit the incumbent. Just the same way it says in the Zimbabwe Constitution. So, you've got ZANU-PF, how they describe and how they, interpret the Constitution, which in my own view is delusional. 1 minute, Patrick Chinamasa says we will need 2 referendums. The next minute he is saying, well, you don't need any referendum at all. We'll just do it. Right? That is ZANU-PF for you. That is the democracy or so-called democracy that exists in Zimbabwe, which is all just nonsense.
So,
Zimbabwe
nice weather
is
today,
a
huh?
dictatorship. Zimbabwe is not,
Sorry about that.
Zimbabwe is not a democracy. Zimbabwe has never been a democracy. And one thing I would want to say, to the international community, particularly, organizations such as SADC, United Nations, Africa, African Union, and all that. No country has just started by killing each other, going into straight out civil war or straight out war. Signs and symptoms are always present. They always, show up. It's like a building. You notice the cracks. That there's something that is terribly wrong here. And the cracks are there in Zimbabwe. It's just a matter of time before it happens. And I believe it will happen at some point. You can only push people so far before they start pushing back. And I think ZANU-PF is pushing and really trying to test how far they can push each and every day. And these organizations, they haven't really done much to speak to their, to their member to say, hold on a minute, what you are doing, to reprimand them, to give them, caution, to say, no, this is not, what our principles and guidelines are. We don't want to get to a situation where we are fighting, there's fighting in the DRC, which they have failed to control now. And then you have also a fight in Zimbabwe, which they will fail to control. We have a situation in South Africa, that is developing. If we do not talk about these matters and we do not correct these matters, I believe that we are heading to an Africa that will not be able to be governed by many of these organizations. We have seen what has happened to the likes of ECOWAS, where Burkina Faso, Mali, and other have completely left to say these organizations are useless to us. They couldn't protect us. We had to do it our own way. I believe we will get there if they don't step in and control some of these cracks that I just mentioned. ZANU-PF has been a thorn in Zimbabweans' side for a very long time, and they keep on pricking and pushing and pushing. Eventually, something will snap, something will give. That is just me warning before it happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. In my closing remarks, I would like to go back to what I said at the beginning. That I hope that, yes, not many people turned out for the street protests yesterday. But I hope it is because people also realize that sometimes you can make an impact by staying at home in instances like this. Staying at home makes a difference. Particularly when you're talking of a situation where the regime is gearing for violence. Those who stayed at home, the regime could not go after you. They can never go into your house and say, why are you not at work? They cannot force you to go to work. More so if you're a vendor, self-employed. If you're a government employee, they'll probably threaten you and saying, if you don't turn up for work, you lose your job. But I think the fight to end the ZANU-PF dictatorship must be taken with the seriousness and urgency the matter demands. The situation cannot go on. There will be many opportunities to pile the pressure on the regime to change. One of the immediate ones is that the regime has forced this Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 on the basis that it's going to deliver economic boom. Like the young lady in the video was saying that the economy is doing well. Everybody knows that the Zimbabwe economy is not doing well. This is just a mirage. The economy has collapsed. Basic services are no longer there. We're talking of millions of Zimbabweans being outside the country, in South Africa and beyond, because the economy has collapsed. The regime wants to make you believe that it is building the nation brick by brick. With who? Millions of Zimbabweans with professions have been forced out of the country. So the economic meltdown is something that the regime cannot hide. And that is a pressure point. That is the one issue the people should be reminding the regime about. And I believe another pressure point, which some people have ignored, is the very fact that ZANU-PF is holding 60% plus of ordinary Zimbabweans to ransom by denying them title deeds to land. It started in the rural areas. The rural people, they are never given title deeds. This dates back to the Ian Smith days. After independence, people thought that would change. It didn't change. And ZANU-PF has deliberately kept that policy for selfish political ends. And now that principle is moved into urban centers as well. Many people have lost their homes in places like Ruwa, where they thought they had the title deeds and they started building their home, only to be told, no, you didn't have title deeds. The person who gave it to you was a land baron. He had no authority to give out the land. Okay, it wasn't our fault. You, the government, should step in and give us the title deeds. No, they don't want to give you title deeds. It's part of the control. There are many opportunities to fight back this ZANU-PF dictatorship. And the people of Zimbabwe must sit up and pay attention. I said this protest yesterday will be a failure if it fizzles into nothing. Just became just another opportunity to make some noise, and that was the end of it. It should not fizzle out. It should be the starting skirmish in the fight to end this ZANU-PF dictatorship. And we must be the ones going up the escalation ladder on this issue. If ZANU-PF does not scrap this constitutional amendment bill, there must be another protest. And we should make it very clear that those street protests will only increase, the numbers will increase the longer the regime refuses to implement meaningful changes. Because the problem is not going away. The dictatorship is not going away. And ZANU-PF is counting on the people to give up and do nothing. I live here in the UK. I know that every first Saturday and third Saturday, a group in London has been holding vigils. You get only a select few who have been holding those vigils. And I salute them for their dedication. That is the spirit we need, we desperately need in Zimbabwe. I agree with the gentleman there who was expressing his disappointment that there are so many Zimbabweans in South Africa, in Joburg, Pretoria, Cape Town, and so forth. And yet, when it came to demonstrations like this, there was hardly anybody in those demonstrations. There is no excuse for it. Other people sacrificed, risked their limbs, livelihoods, and many lost their lives in the fight for independence. And we, who inherited that independence, have a duty to defend it. And we should not leave it to just a few individuals to do it. You can do your bit. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good night.